Picture a totally still, perfectly calm pond. That is our ideal, highly optimized global economy. Now, imagine a heavy rock being violently hurled right into the center of it. The impact is sudden, it's violent, and it displaces literally everything around it. I recently learned this Portuguese phrase, coisas de guerra, the things of war. The battles, the military machinations, the sheer destructive impetus. Well, when these coisas de guerra strike, they act exactly like that rock in the pond. The initial splash might happen on the absolute opposite side of the planet, but the economic ripples travel outward, unavoidable and absolute, straight to your front door, and ultimately straight to your wallet. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're mapping out exactly how that happens.
It's a fascinating but honestly deeply unsettling mystery, isn't it? A border dispute or regional conflict breaks out an ocean away, and suddenly the price of bread at your local supermarket jumps, or you literally can't get a specific part to fix your car. It feels totally disconnected, but underneath the surface, the wiring of our modern world makes it a mathematical certainty. Okay, let's dive into this.
To truly understand this phenomenon, we're going to track these shockwaves in 5 distinct stages. We'll start at the epicenter with the death of trade. Next, we'll watch how that shatters the supply chain. Then, we'll measure the actual cost of conflict when it washes ashore in our local economies. After that, we'll look at history's enduring lessons, before finally projecting what this all means for the future of globalization.
So, let's start right at the source with Part 1, the death of trade, the epicenter of disruption.
When military operations kick off, the physical arteries of commerce are the very first casualty, right alongside human life. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it breaks classical economic theory. Take David Ricardo's idea of comparative advantage. It's basically the bedrock of modern international trade. But it has one massive blind spot. It completely assumes peace. It assumes goods can move freely. But war weaponizes trade. Think of naval blockades, like the Union blockade during the American Civil War that starved the South's cotton exports, or modern economic embargoes. These aren't just policies, right? They are absolute, insurmountable trade barriers that take that foundational assumption of unimpeded exchange and instantly shatter it into a million pieces.
And this disruption isn't just theoretical, it is intensely physical. War requires the deliberate targeting of infrastructure. We are talking about erasing trade facilitators. When ports are mined or shipping lanes are bombed, it doesn't just stop military supplies, it halts global civilian shipping schedules entirely. Severing railways and roads isolates whole regions, destroying domestic commerce. And crippling energy grids, that cascades into literally every single sector. You know how we always talk about network effects in a positive way with tech? Well, bombing a major port is a terrifying reversed network effect. It's the violent dismantling of global connections.
But the destruction goes way beyond brick and mortar or steel and concrete. It destroys trust. Imagine you're a local business owner. When war breaks out, the profound uncertainty instantly kills foreign investment. You panic and you move your money somewhere safe. That is called capital flight. It completely hollows out the institutional framework of a nation. The capital needed to rebuild simply flees, leaving economic ruin in its wake.
Which brings us to Part 2, shattering the supply chain, the first wave.
Once trade dies locally, the logistical nightmare begins globally. The first wave travels outward from the epicenter, and suddenly factories on the exact opposite side of the planet find themselves missing crucial pieces. Our modern production networks are an absolute marvel, but man, they are incredibly fragile. Just look at how conflicts map directly onto everyday items. If a war breaks out in a region rich in raw materials, think oil, natural gas, or agriculture, the global impact is immediate. Energy prices spike, and food shortages begin. But what if the conflict hits a region that specializes in manufactured components, like microchips? Suddenly the production of smartphones, laptops, and cars worldwide just stops. A skirmish over a tiny stretch of land can quite literally halt a car factory a continent away.
And this brilliantly illustrates the unforgiving domino effect at play here. It's a linear chain reaction. Step 1, a raw material gets blocked by the conflict. Step 2, a component shortage emerges globally. Step 3, and this is just classic human nature, panic buying and hoarding begin, which drastically worsens the shortage. And finally, Step 4, a total production halt. Businesses completely run out of inventory and are forced to shut down operations. The supply chain isn't just delayed, it's severed.
Moving on to Part 3, the cost of conflict, the shoreline.
This is the shoreline. This is where those massive waves of supply bottlenecks and logistical nightmares finally crash into our everyday lives, directly hitting our personal economic stability. To really grasp this, we have to define a crucial piece of economic jargon, stagflation. It is arguably the absolute worst economic condition a society can face, because supply is choked off by the war, the prices of basic goods, energy, food, materials skyrocket.
That's your high inflation. But simultaneously, because factories are halting and uncertainty is off the charts, businesses aren't growing or hiring. That's your stagnant growth. Basically, your cost of living surges at the exact moment your economic opportunities vanish.
In fact, wartime shocks completely break our traditional models. There's an old rule in economics called the Phillips curve. It basically said you could either have high inflation or high unemployment, but usually not both at the exact same time. Well, war throws that right out the window. Between massive surges in wartime government spending, the devaluation of currencies, and severe supply constraints, war creates this perfect storm where both inflation and unemployment attack the consumer simultaneously.
And the culmination of all this is the very real specter of a global recession. The psychology here is fascinating, actually. When lead times double and prices surge, what do? You stop spending. You delay buying that new car or updating your kitchen appliances. Businesses see you close your wallet, so they panic and stop investing due to the heightened risk. It's what economists call the theory of rational expectations, which is really just a fancy way of saying everyone expects the worst, so everyone acts defensively. This ultimately guarantees a vicious, self-fulfilling cycle of global recession.
Let's look at Part 4, History's Enduring Lessons, the proof.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking this all sounds like a theoretical, worst-case scenario, let's look at history, because it proves it's not. It's an inevitable, repeating pattern. Every major conflict has forced a totally painful reconfiguration of the global economy. The period right before World War I was actually incredibly interconnected, but the war caused a complete collapse of that first era of globalization through blockades. World War II brought unprecedented infrastructure destruction, leading to a massive global economic reset and the birth of brand new institutions to manage the fallout. And the Cold War, even while avoiding direct global conflict, caused persistent economic strain through proxy wars, dividing the world into competing, highly inefficient economic blocs.
So, the overarching takeaway from all these historical parallels is crystal clear. A highly specialized, highly interconnected world is exceptionally vulnerable to geopolitical shocks. When we optimize perfectly for peacetime efficiency, where every single country makes only what it's best at, we inadvertently strip away all our armor. War constantly exposes this extreme fragility.
Finally, Part 5, the future of globalization, the receding tide.
So, where does this leave us today? The tide that brought us this interconnected world is receding, and countries are being forced to completely rethink how they trade. We are watching a massive strategic pivot right now. For decades, the goal was pure global efficiency, finding the cheapest labor and materials no matter how far away they were. Today, the goal is supply chain resilience, and this is taking two main forms. First, we have reshoring, bringing factories entirely back to the home country. It guarantees maximum control, sure, but it drastically increases costs for consumers. Then we have nearshoring, moving production to nearby, friendly allied countries to strike a balance between security and transportation efficiency. The bottom line? Efficiency is no longer king. Security is.
So the crucial point is that these causes de guerra don't just shift supply chains, they shift global power. This brings up something called hegemonic stability theory. It's the idea the global markets only really run smoothly when there's a dominant economic power acting as the world's anchor, setting the rules. But as conflicts fracture trade and nations pull their production closer to home, new regional trading blocs are forming. The power dynamic is shifting, and history tells us for sure that such shifts inherently lead to a less predictable and far more unstable economic landscape.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought to chew on. As conflicts continue to expose the deep vulnerabilities in our interconnected world, are we watching the permanent end of hyperglobalization, or are we simply witnessing its next, more defensive evolution? The next time you see a price jump at the grocery store or read about a random part shortage, remember the ripple effect. Remember that the global economy is a pond, and the rocks are still being thrown. Keep questioning the interconnected world around you, and thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.